This is Dr. Hart again, and I'll just complete this brief presentation on cognitive transitions of adolescence. As I was saying, we can look at different forms of intelligence, Stern's triarchic theory, Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, and we can use this as the basis for starting to look at how these different forms of intelligence are developed by adolescents, and how these different forms of intelligence can start to move us towards preferences for careers, preferences for different types of hobbies, preferences for different forms of intelligence. Now, social cognition in adolescence. Here we come to the idea of the theory of mind. In other words, the understanding that others have beliefs, feelings, and intentions that may be different from yours. And so a well-developed or a developing adolescents will start to develop a theory of mind. They'll start to develop theories about why people think the way they do, why people act the way they do. Also, it's at this time that adolescents will start to be thinking about relationships. What are their beliefs about peers? What are their beliefs about genders? What are their beliefs about social conventions, acting towards others as demanded by social conventions? These are all aspects of social cognition. A specialized area that has to do with social cognition are things like law and civil liberties and rights, and the attitude that adolescents may have towards these important abstract concepts. Are they going to decide to obey, or are they going to rebel against these laws and rights? These are influenced by, and in turn influence, the attitudes that adolescents have towards authorities and their attitudes towards parents, and we could add their attitudes towards their peers and attitudes towards their teachers as well. So it's at this time that adolescents start to develop some firm beliefs about what's their relationship to laws and government and their relationship to authorities and parents. This leads to a discussion about adolescent risk-taking. In adolescent risk-taking, the main driving theory right now is something called behavioral decision theory, which is based on the idea that decision-making is a rational process that looks at risks and rewards of taking certain actions. So like, for instance, an example might be to decide to get a ride home from a friend who's been drinking. Well, in the decision-making process for that challenge, the adolescent is probably going to be thinking about the risks involved in going home with a friend who's been drinking, but then they might also be thinking about some of the rewards that might go along with going home with someone who's been drinking. At least you get home, perhaps, and also you maintain a relationship with a friend, because by refusing to go home with that friend who's been drinking, the friend might be offended. They might feel that the adolescent is being moralistic, judgmental, and therefore it might endanger their relationship. So there's a definite risk, not just the physical risk of going home with someone who's been drinking, but on the other side, refusing to go home with someone who's been drinking can risk the end of a relationship. So the idea here is that we're not thinking necessarily very openly and out loud about these risks and rewards, but they definitely start to color our thinking about whether we are going to take risks or whether we're going to stay safe. So I am wont to do in all of these lectures, I want you to be thinking about what does all of this mean to Ecuadorian adolescents. For instance, the whole idea about hypothetical thinking about what-if situations. Do you think that Ecuadorian adolescents think differently about hypothetical thinking? Do you think that they think differently about relationships? We've talked a little bit about the difference in culture in Ecuador compared to the United States about relationships to authority figures. Well, so is that true in Ecuador? Is the thinking about that relationship to authority figures different in Ecuador than, say, in the United States or in Europe? Another question might be a response inhibition, the idea that we're holding back, that we're not giving in to those pleasure chemicals that are going on in our brain, like dopamine. Is response inhibition different in Ecuador than it is in North America, do you think? How about law and politics and the adolescent's relationship to the law and to politics in Ecuador? Is that different than in the United States or in other parts of the world? And what implications do we think that might have towards adolescent behavior and how we treat them and how we teach them and train them? And finally, another aspect that we could talk about is, which we've already talked about a little bit, is risk-taking. Is risk-taking behavior among Ecuadorian adolescents different? Do they look at the risks and rewards of dangerous behavior differently than the North American adolescents or European adolescents or perhaps Asian adolescents? So those are all questions that we can ask based on these ideas about cognitive transitions that adolescents need to make.